Hey guys, my name's Carla Sabella and I've been teaching for the last 18 years and specializing in English. And today I'm going to talk to you about Aristotle's tragic structure or theory of tragedy. So if you have not heard of the person or word Oedipus before, or Freud, you will definitely be seeing it in a lot of different places after today. So when we're looking at this particular theory, Aristotle, so he basically came up with this structure of tragedy, this classic structure where it follows a very distinct pathway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain the story of Oedipus to give you an understanding of what all these terms mean, because even when I was doing research on it, I found it like very obscure. Okay, so I'm going to bring some of the terms in that he refers to, but I'm going to do it through the story of what actually happens to Oedipus, because the structure of that is just like the best way of understanding it. And then we'll apply it to some other texts that it's very prominent, such as Shakespeare's Othello, the Great Gatsby. Anyway, there's lots of places it's relevant. So Oedipus basically was born, and his parents were told by someone who, whatever, tells prophecies that this child will grow up to murder his father and marry his mother. Kind of obscure, but very specific. So these parents thought, oh my gosh, like, let's get rid of this child, because we, obviously don't want that happening. So they send the child off to a shepherd who is supposed to murder the child, but then feels bad for the baby, and so then doesn't kill it and sends it far, far away, right? So then he's, now adopted, he grows up in his family, and then another person, foretells that he will grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. And he thinks that his adopted parents are his parents, because obviously he doesn't know that he's not actually born from them. So in order to protect them, he goes far, far, far away, obviously, ironically, back to where he originally started. And then he's just in the street. He has an altercation with his father, who obviously he has no idea is his father, murders him. That was just like a bit nonchalant, whatever. Then sees his mother, doesn't know it's his mother, totally falls in love with her, has a couple of kids with her, and then it all comes out that he has actually done what he's done. So murdered his own father, married his mother, had children with her, which, as you can imagine, is completely horrific. And at that point, his mother commits suicide because she can't deal with how completely gross it is. And he gouges his eyes out as a symbol of his blindness, and the fact that, human beings, can be deceived, or appearances can be deceiving, or, we have a blindness. So how this then tracks into Aristotle's theory is, the beginning of the track, there's always a hero to start with, so the person who's usually like from a quite a, like an upper class, or, well-to-do, like high-ranking sort of individual. And that's where Oedipus was originally born. Like he's, I don't know if it was king or a queen, but anyway, they were leaders in some way. You can look that up. And so, he's the hero. And then what happens is the hero has some kind of what we call hamartia. So hamartia is like a fatal flaw. So again, like you may have heard this term, or you will now too going forward. So the fatal flaw is a blindness, so an inability to see reality, to see what's really, going on. And this is something that human beings all possess, right? So if we look in at a situation, we don't necessarily know what the truth is, especially if it looks a certain way. So a really great modern example of that is, when we see news on things like social media, or even just news in general, it's like who wrote that, what purpose is behind it, is there a bias, is there like, financial benefit for someone for creating that representation somewhere, whatever it is. But the point is, when we look at it, we may believe what's there and have no idea that that's been completely made up or constructed or skewed in some way, right? So it's a fundamental aspect of the human condition that we have this blindness. So everyone in the audience can relate to the hero's inability, or like that flaw, because we all have that flaw, we all share that, right? So in these particular tragedies, we know, like, we can see the whole picture, but the protagonist can't, right? So when we're so in the Oedipus example, or maybe some of you have done something like Macbeth or Othello, we can see that they're going to have a downfall. Like, we know that they're being deceived in some way, through the way that the actual play or the text is being constructed, right? We're not an audience who doesn't know that all these things are going to happen. Like, we know Oedipus is killing his father and marrying his mother, and then he finds out, and we know Othello is being deceived by Iago. It's all about him learning that deceptions happen once, like, irrevocable damage has been done. Irreparable damage has been done. So, as an audience, like, we're watching the whole thing and we see them be blind to it, and you're like, oh my God, no, that person's a liar, or that's not what's happening, this is happening. But obviously, you're spectating. So we witness their whole downfall. So we see them as the hero. We see them be blind and have that fatal flaw. We see their downfall, and there's this moment of absolute catastrophe where, they see it, like, it all comes to light. So you can imagine Oedipus realizing he's, murdered his father, married his mother, had children with his mother. Ew. That it's just, it's unbearable, so obviously there's those ramifications of, like, mother committing suicide, and then the back to that motif of being blind, gouging his eyes out, because he can't see. Anyway, it's all figurative. So, and then in that final moment, we have something called a catharsis, which for the audience is kind of that, like, that realization, or it's almost like, it's a weirdly satisfying feeling of that, okay, they've now realized they were blind, and it's all come to light. There's been some kind of resolution about the stuff up. Lots of definitions about catharsis. It's the idea of, like, purification. Tragedy is all about, like, fear and pity, and then like, at the end there's that again, like, that resolution, which is almost satisfying for us. So there's lots of different definitions of catharsis, so have a look through and see which one sort of makes sense to you. But it's like a purging, or, like, again, a resolution of, like, tensions or whatever, where finally it's all come out and everybody knows everything. So great. So that's a bit of a rundown. And so, yeah, obviously I've given you some examples of things like how that relates to Othello. So Othello didn't realize that obviously Iago was tricking him, pretending to be on his side, but actually totally manipulating him, and into thinking that his wife's having an affair, which she isn't. He then murders his wife, who he loves, finds out that he was deceived that whole time, and, like, obviously that's completely horrific for him. So we witness that like, utter degradation, catastrophe, downfall of that once valiant, heroic individual who just had a fatal flaw, which again we all have. If you're looking at something like I don't know, Great Gatsby, Gatsby is considered to be a bit of a tragic hero. So he's got all the wealth, he's achieved the American dream, but what he doesn't see is, like, Daisy doesn't really love him, and he, that dream's empty. Like, there's this idea that the American dream will provide happiness and satisfaction in some way, but it turns out to be purely materialistic, and it's just a facade. It's just fake, right? So again, there's that, you're blind to the fact that that's an empty promise, it's an empty dream, and then again, like, the total utter downfall upon realizing that. So hopefully that's given you some idea of how to understand the framework of the Aristotelian tragedy. I would do a bit more research after this. I've given you a sort of more hopefully engaging overview of it, but that there's many analysis, deconstructions and images, and lots of words and stuff. So if you look up those words, they should all fit into what I've been talking about in some way, but I've given you the main ones. So you've got, like, there's the idea of a tragic hero, there's a fatal flaw, the hamartia, the catharsis. These are kind of the main ones, and then there are other ones too that you can have a look at.